Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and I finally have the Bloom related comps video ready. So as I've mentioned before, I'm not going to do like the usual math for it because there's just way too many reactions being involved, but I'll talk generally speaking how to tackle those reactions, what is the best comp, at least in my opinion for now, before we have the chance to test. And I'll run through all the comps. We'll do one session on the detailed mechanics as well. So let's dive right in. So before we start, Bloom related comps have multiple reactions, not just Dendro reactions, so there's multiple options. So I'll cover Bloom, Burgeon, HyperBloom, and obviously Burgeon plus HyperBloom. Okay, so a quick update on Collei's QICD from my Collei Math Guide 1. Collei Math Guide 1 had the assumption that Collei has a standard ICD on her talents, but it's now been more or less confirmed that her Q has a unique ICD where there is no X hit rule, so there's no 3 hit rule, there's no 5 hit rule. It is only 2.5 seconds. That means that in her 9 seconds of Q, only 3 Dendro application instances will occur, right? Because every 2.5 seconds, that's within 9 seconds, that's 3 instances. It's not 3 seconds, I think it's 2.5 seconds, just that it's only 3 instances will occur in her 9 seconds of Q. So I have to say that that is pretty scuffed for her. DMC, Dendro Traveler, on the other hand, or Dendro main character, actually has the same application rate, but DMC Q lasts longer, which means you do get more Dendro application that way. But technically speaking, it's only about one more application from the Q. So main pair of this will be in Bloom rated comps where you value constant generation of seeds. Aggravate / spread should not be an issue since Quicken lasts 6 to 20 seconds. In fact, within the first 9 seconds, Collei will still have a better Dendro application due to her E. Because you're just not just using the Q, right? You're using the E together. And especially if you have C2 where her sprout lasts for even longer duration, then it will help with more application. So basically, Collei gives you more seeds within the first 9 seconds, but DMC gives you a longer period. So it really depends on whether you need that window, the window of 9 seconds, whether it's sufficient for you or you need a longer window. Okay. So detailed mechanics of balloon related reactions. A source of information here with regards to mechanics are all from the Dendro guide shared in the Kusanali mains. Do check out that guide and I'll provide the source link in the description as well. So the guide also has some very detailed information. I won't cover all of them here. I'll cover some of the more significant ones to note as well as the ones that are a little more layman. I'll also make them more layman so it's easier to understand. So let's talk about the Dendro cores created for Bloom. Okay. Each core, Dendro core created from Bloom lasts 6 seconds each before Rupture occurs. Rupture is the one where the Dendro core explodes when there are no further reaction to it. You leave it alone for 6 seconds, it automatically expires and explodes. That's Rupture. Max, you can have 5 cores on field at the same time, as mentioned in my Dendro reactions guide earlier, way back. So generating a 6th core will rupture the first. Now this is very important for Rupture cores to be visible. Seeds can be vacuumed by animal CC abilities. You can easily check that out. There's a lot of leaked videos now showing that. All seed-based reactions can proc max 2 times every 0.5 second on each enemy for the same reaction. Now this is more like a reaction ICD. This is not the standard elemental application ICD. This is different. This is just making it such that if you, for example, if you Burgeon 5, 6 together, the enemies are only going to take damage from 2 of them each. So for example, if you proc 3 of the same seed reactions from one elemental attack within 0.5 seconds, enemies only take damage from 2. So this is very similar to how Swirl currently works anyway. So no real surprise there. But if you set up your rotation correctly, you should not have 5 seeds left untriggered in Burgeon or HyperBloom Comps. Okay. Now, enemy attacks can proc seed reactions to deal damage to players. So this may be significant against opponents with continuous attacks where they proc Burgeon or HyperBloom before you can. So gotta take note on those. But I would expect that it's usually the bosses or elite mobs. Yeah, so just one thing to take note of to manage. Now let's talk about gauge unit for Bloom. I know this is very, very technical. I will try to make it as layman as possible. So I actually use a very simplified example here. So if you trigger Hydro onto Dendro, so Dendro is existing on your enemy, you apply a Hydro. When you trigger the bloom, 0.5x of the Dendro is consumed. So how does that work? So example, if 1U of Hydro is applied, there's no other existing elements on the enemy as well. 1U Hydro and 0.5U Dendro is consumed. If you trigger Dendro onto Hydro, 2x of the Hydro is consumed. So in the reverse way, if it's existing Hydro on the opponent and you trigger Dendro, you're gonna consume a lot more. So example, 1U of Dendro applied, no other existing elements that react with Dendro. 2U Hydro and 1U of Dendro will be consumed. So if your enemy has only 1.6, you will consume all 1.6, for example. If your enemy has 3x, then you'll be left with 3U or you'll be left with 1U. Okay, so that's how it works. So basically, this is a very simplified layman explanation. To be exact, there's aura tests, reaction coefficients, sibling auras, etc. to consider. But I'm not going to that level of detail in this video. What I want to bring across the point here is that it should be fairly clear that ideally we want Dendro to be present and Hydro to be true trigger, which means Hydro application cannot be too strong and Dendro cannot be too weak. Too strong in the sense that even after the third element Electro or Pyro in HyperBloom or Burgeon, yeah, Hydro still end up being the persistent aura on enemies. That's what I mean by too strong. So don't worry about, say, how should I put it? The Hydro application needs to be really strong in order to be the persistent aura when it's reacting with two elements, Electro Pyro plus Electro/Pyro plus Dendro. Okay, so yeah, don't be too overly concerned about that. Okay, now obviously we'll do more testing once 3.0 is out, so we'll be sure whether or not, say, someone like Childe is way too much Hydro application. But I do believe that you can still use Childe, it's just that you need to adjust the other characters accordingly. Okay, so Phrygian. Phrygian is a concept where, how should I put it? Right now, for multi-reactions, Phrygian concept is already there. So even this applies even for Dendro being added as a new element. So a best example, which is very similar to the example that is provided in the Dendro guide. So Cryo not reacting with Dendro but being able to assist with Dendro as a separate aura. What does this mean? This means that enemy can have both Cryo and Dendro applied on them at the same time. And when you apply Hydro to an opponent with both Cryo and Dendro on them, the Hydro will first react with Cryo to create freeze. Okay, so it first reacts with Cryo to freeze the opponent. And whatever leftover Hydro would then react with the Dendro. And the 0.5s Dendro that is consumed is 0.5s of the leftover Hydro instead of your full 1U or 2U Hydro application. So what this means is that basically Cryo, although it doesn't react with Dendro, it has a utility here where it helps reduce the amount of Dendro that's consumed for your bloom, and essentially allows you to trigger more blooms of the same amount of Dendro. So that's very nice, right? That's a nice concept. But however, you do need to use up one precious slot of your team members, like 4 team members, to have a Cryo in there. Right? Now, I'll definitely talk about a comp where we have Phrygian and Freeze. Now, let's talk about self-inflicted damage. As most folks will know by now, Rupture and Burgeon does damage to players in its AoE explosion as well, and has been changed from 10% in early leagues to 5%. So what does this mean? This means that a Burgeon prop by a 1000 EM character at level 90 will deal about 5% of 27k, which is 1350 damage to players. A Rupture prop by a 1000 EM character at level 90 will deal 5% of 18k, which is 900 damage. So above 1000 is a bit painful, below 1000 is fine. But to be fair, this damage can get substantial over time if you don't have any healing or shields in your team. But it wouldn't one-shot you in one animal character pool, because I've seen posts talking about, oh, you can use animal characters, they would just kill yourself. That's not the case. You just look at this damage, you know it's not the case. Okay? So in the first place, in a proper Burgeon rotation, you wouldn't have 5 Dendro cores for your Kazuha to pull into. you should be triggering the cost as it spawns. If you do a rotation correctly, you should not pull 5 Dendro costs into yourself and then apply Burgeon on all 5 of them at the same time. And besides, there should be reaction ICD as well. And as for Rupture Comps, you won't be able to prod all 5 Dendro costs at the same time anyway, right? Because you only prod it when the time reaches or you generate a safe call. And someone like Tighnari with his multi-hit can only generate 2 with each attack as well. Each charge attack. So to be honest, I wouldn't be overly concerned about Kazuha animal pools dealing too much self-inflicted damage, to be honest. As long as you have a healer, it will be manageable. And the same applies even without animal pools, by the way. Even without animal pools, you are still open to the risk of getting hit by the explosion. You still need a healer if you're going to go Rupture or Burgeon. Okay? HyperBloom doesn't cause self-inflicted damage. HyperBloom triggers a homing shot, so there's no self-inflicted damage. So I hope this point here is clear. Okay, maybe I have not seen that video, but I suspect maybe people saw some private server video where the damage figures are way too unrealistic, and so that's why the 5% of that unrealistic figure ended up killing the Kazuha or something. Okay, but I hope that these figures here, with actual proper math, realistic figures, shows you that that's not gonna one shot you. Alright, now let's talk about the comps themselves. So you have Rupture Comps. Rupture Comps is a bit unique in the sense that we are ignoring the Burgeon and the HyperBloom. We don't care about the second step in the bloom reactions. What we are looking to do is to generate as many Dendro cores, which actually applies to all the bloom related reaction comps, be it bloom, HyperBloom, or Burgeon. But this is particularly important in Rupture cores for these reasons. A, we want to generate the safe core to trigger Rupture ASAP instead of waiting for 6 seconds. So you have to after the first 5 cores, that is where once you start generating the 6, 7, 8, etc., that is where your Rupture starts happening. And you have to do that as soon as possible, and you have to create the cores as much as possible, so as to match Burgeon and HyperBloom's higher multipliers. Because remember, Burgeon and HyperBloom does 50% more than the Rupture. And if you generate cores as soon as possible, it also reduces the chance of the individual cores being activated by enemies. Although, in Rupture Comps, you will always have 5 on the ground. So it's better to have a bit of CC. Okay, and I'll talk about that later. In fact, right now. So based on this understanding here, I'll say that the feasible Rupture Comps will be 2 Dendro with 2 Hydro, or 2 Dendro with 1 Hydro, 1 Animal. So obviously which character is main depends on whether you want to use Dendro main or Hydro main, or maybe even Animal main like Hazel, which are then determine the sub DPS characters. So for example, if you're using Tighnari as the Dendro main, your Hydro character shouldn't be someone like Ayato. Kokomi Mona would be better. Not to mention that Kokomi gives you the healing that you will need. I don't like Xingqiu and Yelan here though, at least in the Rupture comp, because Tighnari is CEA based. I mean, if you're using Tighnari, so it's kind of awkward. You don't get to proc it naturally as part of Tighnari's kit. I really hope that the next there will be a Dendro NA DPS character, maybe Alhitem or something. Since he's using a sword, right? Hopefully he's an NA character, because an NA Dendro character is going to work very nicely with Xingqiu and Yelan and even Thoma, right? I really hope so. Let's see how that goes. Even Beidou, actually. Provided that the NA DPS character is NA damage and not other types of damage. Yeah, kill the Raiden Beidou saga. Now, if you don't have Tighnari, it should be something like Dendro DMC plus Collei, because that's the only 3 Dendro options that we have now. So Dendro DMC plus Collei plus a Hydro mid, Yelan or Ayato, plus a Animal or Hydro support, depending on which comp you're going for. Preferably healer, obviously, right? So if you're doing something like this, right, a Animal healer will be someone like Sayu. The only problem is that Sayu doesn't have any CC pool, right? Or you can do someone like Jean. Jean has heal in her Q and she has pull from her E. So that helps a little. And obviously there are more permutations, but I think this should give you guys a general idea how to build the Rupture Comps. Personally, I would prefer having one animal so as to pull enemies together and CC them to prevent them from attacking the cores. This is very important. We do not want the enemy attacks to trigger our cores. Because every enemy attack that triggered one of your cores means that there's a delay for your rupture. Right? Because imagine you have 5 cores on the floor. One core gets interrupted. So the next core that they generate is not going to rupture your first core on the field. It's going to just create the 5th core. So animal is really I shouldn't say animal, but CC is really very important here. To ensure your cores hit all the enemy. To ensure that the enemies do not attack your cores. And it also helps to ensure the cores hit all the enemies because the rupture, although it's AoE, it's not as big of an AoE as Burgeon. But if you pull them all together, for sure, a rupture core will be more than enough to hit. Each rupture core will be more than enough to hit. Okay. So on top of the VV buffs to the Hydro character too, especially if you're using Hydro main, and other buffs like Sucrose and Kazuha's, right? EM buff to a Dendro Comps is really good. Not to mention the damage bonuses as well. Ideally, we want Hydro element to proc. So Animal infused with Hydro will achieve this on top of having high EM naturally, because don't forget you have 2 Dendro here, so that's why you can afford the Animal infusion with Hydro. Although I know that you want Dendro as the persistent aura and then you trigger Hydro. Right? Wait. Let me double check. Yeah. You want Hydro to be a trigger. For a moment, my man went blank there. Sorry. Now, if the Hydro character procs, the rupture damage will be lower. Okay? That's something that I realized that when people are doing all the Bloom comps, right, they don't really think about the maximizing the rupture or the Burgeon damage, which is a little surprising to me. So, like for example, right, if you have a Kokomi, right, you wouldn't really build Kokomi as EM. I mean, I've done many videos in the past about EC, Kokomi and EC and whether it's worthwhile building EM on her, and unfortunately, it's not that great. But I guess in a Dendro comp where you want her to proc, maybe there is some merit to it, but still not as great, right? So with enough team buff set up for EM, I think it may still be okay for if the Hydro character procs instead of the Hydro infused animal. But the trade-off for one Hydro in this comp is that higher EI is required on your Hydro character, right? No battery. Dendro has the battery, Hydro doesn't have the battery. So that's a trade-off. And lastly, since we are only exploding the safe cores, we will not run into issue of exceeding the 2 per 0.5 second ICD limit, unlike Burgeon HyperBloom. Why? Because there's no way you can trigger, unless you can trigger more than 2 blooms in one attack. Even Tighnari with his multi-hit talents is still at 2 each. So you always remember the way Rupture works is that you need the 5 cores there, and every new core that you generate then explodes. So you're not going to be able to generate 5 cores at once. Okay? Even the multi-enemy scenario, maybe. Yeah, actually in the multi-enemy scenario, maybe. But I wouldn't worry that much about it because Rupture in the first place also does less damage than Burgeon. And you are supposed to build a healer here. Okay? Alright, now let's talk about Free Structure Comp. Free Structure Comp is kind of limited in the options. You basically have 1 Dendro, 1 Hydro, 1 Animal, 1 Cryo. Now, if you remember how Freeze Comp works, you always have an animal character here because you always want to pull them together and then freeze them together. Otherwise, I don't know what kind of Freeze Comp it is when you're freezing only 1 or 2 enemies. You know what I mean? So another possible option will be to go 1 Hydro, which is what I've just mentioned, where basically we use Freezing to manage having only 1 Dendro. Because if you remember what I explained about Freezing earlier, it reduces your Dendro consumption, so we may be able to manage with only 1 Dendro. And in theory, it should be almost the same number of Dendro cores, while still providing the capability to freeze and utilize the ever-efficient 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, right? But the trade-off here is obviously energy, because it's a rainbow comp. You need more ER, and Favonius is particularly important here if possible. I would think that Favonius Sword on DMC would be a good example, right? You're using a DMC here with Favonius Sword helps to give energy to the rest of the comp. Now let's talk about Burgeon Comps. Burgeon's damage is dependent on the EM of the Pyro attack triggering the Burgeon, which means either a Pyro Sword onto Seed or direct Pyro attack on it. What this means is that a animal Q infused with Pyro will definitely have good damage, because it's natural to have a high EM on the animal character. The Pyro character, however, will require you to build EM, at least a little bit of it, along with team buff EMs for your Burgeon damage to be good, which isn't exactly the norm for Pyro characters. Because most Pyro characters, you do focus more on attack and crit stats, and then a little bit of EM for your Vaporize and Melt, right? But this is where Xianling with her EM session stat comes in, right? Not to mention her Q works well as an off-field applicator for Burgeon too. Now, when using DMC as a Dendro support in Burgeon Comps, he's still feasible. You just need to make sure that you transfigure Hydro on his Q first before applying Hydro. That's all. Okay? Just make sure you transfigure Hydro on his Q first. Make his Q Lotus become bigger with the Hydro instead of making it explode with Pyro. So for a Burgeon comp, typically I would say it's something like not typically, but I would think that I prefer something like 1 Dendro, 1 Pyro, 1 Hydro, and 1 Animal. So it's really about all the benefits that Animal bring. And ideally you want to infuse the Animal with Hydro to ensure constant generation of the seeds. Okay, sorry, let me move this a little. Yeah. So that we still have enough Hydro to generate seeds after Vaporize. Right? Why do I want to infuse Hydro here when I already have Hydro? Because we need to make sure that we have enough Hydro to generate seeds after Vaporize. You're going to have Vaporize triggering because you're applying Pyro at the same time. And we can use either Xianling's Q or Thoma for the Pyro application if you're not using a Pyro main. I'll talk more about Thoma later. I have a specific session here for Thoma. Now, infusing Animal with Pyro to create some fire and in turn getting Bandit's attack buff may be feasible, while also ensuring high animal damage for animal characters, high EM, because the only off-field application you're getting will be the animal infused with Pyro. But the consistency of the seed generation seeds needs to be tested. Consistency of seed generation needs to be tested because, like I said, there's going to be Vaporize. If you only have one Hydro application, from one character, I'm not sure whether it's insufficient. Whether it's sufficient, to be honest. And duration of Sunfire is also pretty short because animal infusion typically is about 8 seconds. So it's a shorter window, which may allow Collei here, right? May allow Collei, but it depends. Now the animal can be substituted for another element to be battery as well for whichever elemental type main that you have, right? You can remove, let's say if you are doing a Pyro main or Hydro main, then you can put either a Pyro or Hydro here instead of Animal. But again, you lose the benefits of the Animal. That's number one. Number two is caution has to be taken on over application. Like if you have too much Pyro here, it's very likely that you will not be able to generate seeds. So a battery without off-field application would be better. Maybe better in this case, right? But more testing is required on this. Okay. So this is the comps. Like I said, I don't want to do like a full solidified comp before we test out Bloom, because Bloom is rather complicated with all the multi-reactions. Now let's talk about Thoma. I have a lot of points here, right? So I have no doubts that Thoma will have a good application rate, Pyro-wise, and synergy with Burgeon. But there are a few points to consider. Okay? I know it looks good in terms of leak videos, but one, ideally you want an DPS character on the other elements to synergize with Thoma's Q to really utilize the efficiency, to have the efficiency there. You can use any character to proc the Thoma's Q, right? Doesn't matter. You can use it on, I don't know, Bennett, DMC, Kazuha, etc. But it's just not as optimized. Okay, it is not as optimized. So keep yourself. Second point, Burgeon's damage when Thoma is a solo pyro really depends on how much EM you can build on him. With Fervonius, he has an issue now where he has to build HP, ER, CR. That to me is the biggest issue for Thoma. But without Fervonius, he doesn't get enough energy as well. And sacrifice isn't great for him. So yeah, that's why he is in an awkward state right now. And with Burgeon coming, if you go full EM on him, you can't really go full EM as well because you still need to get ER, still need to get HP. Otherwise, the shield is terrible, and I'll talk more about the shield later. Now, I know Kittin Spear helps with energy and it's really good for a EM Burgeon Thoma build. But I'm gonna share with you guys, okay? Even after R5 Kitten Spear plus a C4 Thoma effect, you still need 50 energy from Thoma. 50 energy is not a small amount that can be obtained without ER investment, especially in a single pyro comp. And this is not something that you will see in the league videos, because in the league videos is private server and their energy never runs out. You realize their Q energy never runs out, it's always full. So that's something that you will not see in those league videos. So that's why it's not as peachy as you would think. Like using Thoma in Burgeon, yes, it works. You are able to prop Burgeon. You can get some EM on Thoma, but it's not going to be like the highest Burgeon damage that you can get. Okay, so maybe there's value in replacing Animal with maybe someone like Bennett, right? If you want to use Thoma and then he gives attack buff to, I don't know, either the Dendro main or the Hydro main, while not causing off-field application. But you have to give up Animal benefits, which is a lot of buffs and debuffs and CC. So the trade-off is there, yeah? So it's kind of not ideal either way. Not the most ideal either way. Let's talk about Thoma Shield, okay? Thoma Shield is already pretty weak now in Fervonius build. So you can't really afford to get weaker per se. Which it actually were if you want to optimize your Burgeon damage and go full EM, we should shoot in a Burgeon comp. Right? Because if you're focusing on Burgeon as your main source of damage along with your main, then you'll be going from something like a ER HP CR, which is typically what you will build now in a Fervonius Thoma build, to something like ER EM EM with either a 4 GD or 4 instructors on the ER EM EM. What this means is that you lose HP, right? You don't need to get CR, which is nice. You go for more EM, but you lose HP. And 4 instructors is feasible only if you have extremely well rolled EM pieces, otherwise I wouldn't recommend it. And you want to give more EM to party. From the set bonuses alone, 4 instructors is actually 200 EM, with 120 of it given to party members as well, versus 230 EM on 4 Gilded Dreams, which is only for the character itself. Sorry. But the thing is, with instructors, it's a 4-star artifact, so you have lower EM main stats, right? And also lower ER main stats actually. Yeah, so lower main stats. So if you want to maximize Thoma's EM, it's definitely not the best choice. It's feasible if you want to increase EM on your other characters and you have EM scaling on those characters, for example. But it's not the best option if you want to optimize Burgeon damage with Thoma. So for example, if you are going all out on Thoma's Burgeon damage, you should go for something like 4 GD with ER, EM, EM. If you can somehow get enough ER without ER sense, by all means go ahead, but his energy demand, like I said, is not low because you need 50 energy even after R5 Kitten Spear and C4 Thoma, and more importantly, it's a single Pyrocom. Single Pyrocom means less energy sources, if you're using R5 Kitten Spear on Thoma, you lose Fervonius as well. So there's a lot of consideration with regards to its energy. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if your shield is weak when you go from ER, EM, EM, you know what the shield is going to do? all it's going to do is just absorb the self-inflicted Burgeon damage and provide no protection versus enemy attacks, not even stagger. Okay, because before you can protect yourself from stagger attacks, right? Your shield is already gone from the Burgeon damage because that's how weak your shield is gonna be when you don't have any HP being stacked on Thoma. So I don't mean to doom post here, by the way. I know a lot of people are looking forward to Thoma in Burgeon. I just feel that it's not as PG as everyone thinks once you consider the stats he needs. But that being said, right, he's still feasible. Golden Burgeon will still improve his damage contribution to the team. So you have to sacrifice his fusions further, and you lose the battery function to the team, which is also very important in a Rainbow Comp. Him not using Favonius in Rainbow Comp means someone else has to use it. Probably DMC. But I don't know whether one character with Favonius is sufficient. Maybe you need 2 characters with Favonius. Although DMC has a low ECD, so that may help. But it also means additional on-field time for DMC. So more testing is required to see if one as Favonius wielder in team is enough. But yeah, there are a lot of factors to consider for Thoma. It's not a simple matter of, oh, just give him R5 Kitten Spear and build him full EM. Yeah, it's not gonna work, okay? If you are using Burgeon as one of your main damage source, his ER is extremely important in order for you to get your Q on 100% uptime. And at 100 ER with 50 energy in a single pyro comp, you can't do it. I'm very, very confident that you can't do it. Okay? You will need ER. You can't go full EM. Alright, so that's Burgeon. Let's talk about HyperBloom Comp now. This video is becoming longer than I wanted to. So HyperBloom's damage is very similar to Burgeon, where it's dependent on the EM of the electro attack triggering the HyperBloom, which means either electro swirl onto core or direct electro attack on it. What this means is that an animal Q infused with electro will definitely have good damage, since it's natural to have high EM on the animal character. I can imagine a scenario like using Fisher or Yae, where it's single target electro, right? By infusing the animal with electro, it helps to do a AoE electro damage and help you to generate more seeds. Now the electro character, however, will require you to build EM. And there are actually 2 characters for whom going full EM is actually decent for electro, which will be Lisa and Cookie. Lisa's Q looks really good when you pull enemies together in a HyperBloom Comp. So what I'll recommend for HyperBloom Comp will be 1 Dendro, 1 Electro, 1 Hydro, 1 Animal. You realize that I always include Animal where possible because Animal benefits are just really good, and the infusion plus the Elemental Swirl also helps with your reactions. So if you're using Lisa, you can use Kokomi as the healer, although HyperBloom doesn't cause self-inflicted damage. So technically speaking, if you're a guy who likes to live dangerously, you can just not use Kokomi, yeah? Now, Cookie obviously is the healer and allows you to use Hydro Mains or Dendro Mains if you choose to, because she's already the healer. You don't need to have another healer here. Because ideally you want to have either one shielder or healer in your comp, even if you don't have self-inflicted damage. But again, up to your playstyle. So both Cookie and Lisa fits perfectly here as the HyperBloom proc character, if you ask me, because you can go full EM on them. And on top of that, you can use Favonius on Cookie to help your energy. Hell, you can even use Favonius on Lisa as well. Or you can use Prototype Ember on Lisa for heals too. Like if you don't want to use Kokomi, you want to use a Hydro Main, you can use Prototype Ember on Lisa. There's a lot of options for Catalyst really. And TTODS, don't forget the attack bar from TTODS. So I'll try to do math for Cookie in HyperBloom soon, because what I see is that Cookie fulfills a battery role, she fulfills damage, she provides damage, and she heals as well. And by damage I mean the HyperBloom damage. Because of her naturally doing full EM, it helps a lot with regards to the HyperBloom damage. Although HyperBloom is single target, it's a homing shot, but still. And on top of that, EM skills Cookie's healing, so she doesn't require as much HP as Thoma would. In fact, right now my full EM Cookie heals more than my full HP Cookie. It's true. She literally heals more. But obviously my full EM pieces also have HP substats, yeah? So 4 GD or 4 instructors can definitely work for Cookie. If you want more EM, refer to the to part 3 in Thoma portion of Burgeon session on this. Okay, whether or not you want to go instructors or 4 GD. Obviously 4 GD still gives you more EM overall, but it also depends on your other team comp members whether you want to give more EM buffs to them. All right. And as for it also okay, more importantly, it depends on whether you have a good 4 instructor set. Because they are 4-star artifacts. 4 instructors can only be obtained from the better treasure chest, the higher grade of treasure chest, and from farming wise is only from the 60 resin bosses. So unless you specifically kept a good set, you're not going to suddenly be able to get it. Okay, or unless you're super lucky. Alright, now as for HyperBloom being Senka target, no worries, you have the other characters for AoE, right? Especially with Animal CC, you can put some other AoE character here. I'm not that worried about AoE really. Not to mention, with the high single target, it's also great for bosses. One point here is that I wouldn't recommend Yae as an electro here since she requires an electro battery, and her E can target Dendro cores, which means it can feel like a waste that way, right? You don't want her E, which is a high damage E, to hit the core and trigger a HyperBloom that does 27k damage if you happen to have 1000 EM, but you wouldn't have 1000 EM on your Yae. So the bloom damage will be HyperBloom damage will be lower if her E hits the Dendro core. Okay. Now, one thing is you can infuse animal with electro to avoid that. To have the infused electro to be the one hitting the Dendro cores. It can I can't say that it will 100% avoid that. It will definitely reduce the chances of Yae's E targeting the Dendro cores. But in the first place, if you are using Yae or Fisher, you should infuse the animal with electro so that you increase the HyperBloom procs and damage. So damage because of the animal character high EM, yeah. So yeah, I really wouldn't recommend Yae here. I think Yae is better off yes in the Agra spread comps. Now a fair point to consider also is that this card has EEC reactions, which means Dendro may be a trigger instead of Hydro for Dendro cores. But so far based on the lead videos, the number of Dendro cores still look pretty good, especially with Venti's lower Q ICD. So the point that I'm trying to bring out here is that we may need to use Venti instead of Sucrose or Kazuha because of his lower QICD. But I'll definitely test this out in 3.0, whether Venti is a must or you can use Kazuha or Sucrose. Because we all know that lead videos have to be taken with a huge dose of salt, because the amount of enemies and the amount of damage that they have is not realistic. Okay, final one. Let's talk about Burgeon plus HyperBloom. There's only one population available for Burgeon plus HyperBloom. It's one Dendro, one Electro, one Hydro, one Pyro. That's it. No animal benefits, so no pools, no EM buffs, no 4-piece VV effect. And given the multiple reactions that are going to happen, it's best to put strong elemental applicators here. I actually think Collei or Tighnari is better here because they provide more Dendro application instances in their windows, though they have shorter windows than DMC. But at the same time, if you use them, then you know that Favordis sword, Favordis weapon needs to be on some other character. Cookie or Lisa or even Raiden for energy are actually good choices here, right? If you put Raiden here, it basically solves your energy issues. Single electro characters like Fisher or Yae is not recommended because there's no animal infusion to help you do the AoE of electro, to apply electro in AoE, so yeah, I don't recommend that. But if you use Raiden, you will need another main with a shorter duration, so that you know 2 short durations make up one main kinda. So that is where Tighnari's short on field time comes in, right? His 5 seconds matches 7 seconds of Raiden to make it 12 seconds, which is kinda the typical time you want your main to be on field. In the past anyway, it's getting shorter and shorter. And someone like Ayato 6 seconds or Childe for whom you can control the duration. So there are many options to try out here, and we'll test this out. I'm interested in even dilute for this comp. But as of now, there are way too many multi-reactions to make even an educated guess on how the comp works out. I mean, I can dive into the unit theory, the gauge unit theory, but I really don't want to do the math for that. 80-20 rule, okay? Too much effort for too little gain. Let me put it that way. So, to be honest, I kind of meant this as a main option in the poll. I'm surprised that's the highest votes. To me, it's more like a comp to play when you don't care about what reactions happen, but you love seeing a whole bunch of different reactions and damage triggers, right? And in that case, right, the focus should be setting the rotation for energy and efficiency in terms of on-field and off-field damage, and just watch everything go wow. Okay? Of course, I may be wrong. When we finally get 3.0 enough and we get enough opportunity to test it, maybe we can test it such that an optimal comp for this ultimate mass comp can be discovered. Because you're pretty much gonna get almost all reactions in the game here, other than those cryo related and crystallize and so on. Otherwise you get a lot of reactions here. But it requires a lot of testing. So my guides has always been pre-testing, so I can't really say whether it will be feasible. But one other thing to note is that I also think that this comp is more feasible when you have enough EM party buffs. And when you don't have any more, what does that mean? It means that it's pretty much will, right? Because you need R1 allergy, you need, I don't know, C4 Collei or C4 Tighnari, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean it works. It's just that without the EM buffs, the Burgeon and the HyperBloom damage and the overloader damage, etc., they all are lower. It's not optimized. It's feasible, but it's more optimized if you have enough EM party buffs. Okay? And Raiden is really important here for the energy. So yep, that's Burgeon plus HyperBloom. Like I said, I really meant it as a kid meme, but yeah. Nevertheless, since it has the highest votes, that's why I went through it here. As for TLDR, to be honest, I don't see a way to effectively summarize what has been covered so far, because it's not like what I've done math to reach the conclusion in each session, right? The only math I did here was really the self-inflicted damage. Although I am doing all the King Kong guides based on my math and experience thus far. So I would suggest to look at the individual sections that you are interested in, the specific comps, okay? But do go through the detailed mechanics section first before going to the comps. Yeah, I'm talking about this section here, where I talk about the mechanics, Dendro cost, properties, gauge unit for bloom, freezing, self-inflicted damage, etc. Please look at that before you look at the other comps. Okay? Whenever I hear the real song, right, I know that the video is long. Okay, so next up, coming up, I have 3 main videos. That will be cooking in HyperBloom, Tighnari weapons, Tighnari constellation, and refinement comparison. I may do a poll to get you guys to help me decide which to do first. Let's see how that goes. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope the content has been helpful, and if you like the content, remember like video and click subscribe for more. Bye.